the Elephant Man script came to me through my babysitter. And she said at one point, she knew I was in the movie business, and I was an AD, and I was working with Mel Brooks, and I was working with Anne Bancroft, and I had worked with Stanley Donen, and she knew all these names, and she said, would you mind reading my boyfriend's script? She said, he's a writer, he's trying to be a writer. He and his partner wrote a script, and so I said, sure, I'll read it. And I put it aside. I loved the script, but it was a tough story, and it was a period, and it was in London, and it was, but I didn't have any preconceptions about what it took to make a movie yet. I was still young. I was still working on whatever movies were out there. I didn't think about the commercial quality of it at the time, and I really liked it. So I wound up, had their numbers. I called them up and I said, come over to my house. They did. We talked. I said, look, I love your script. I think it's terrific. I said, I'm an assistant director, production manager, but I want to be a producer. And I think I could produce this. And I would really like to take a shot at it, but I need to get an option from you. So they were thrilled that somebody had read their stuff. They weren't in any guilds. They literally were just had jobs in California. They had come out of San Francisco. I think they went to school in San Francisco. And they said, sure. So I paid him $1,000, which was a huge amount of money for me, as an option on their screenplay. When we finished Fatso, which I was, as I said, I was a production manager on, I get a call from Mel in New York, and he says, hey, I just read this script that was on your, my associate's desk, and it's called The Elephant Man. What do you know about it? And I said, well, I optioned it. I own it. He says, well, when you get back to LA, give me a call. Let's get together. I'd like to talk to you about it. And he says, look, I'm thinking of starting a company to make movies other than my own comedies. And I really think this is a terrific story, and I'd love to do it. You can produce it. I know you know how to produce. I mean, I know you're good. I've watched you. You've done stuff with my wife and with me, and I have total faith in you. So you're the producer. He said, but I'd like to help finance it. And here's the deal. I'm going to raise the money, and the original deal was he would give me, he would have 75% ownership, and I would have 25% ownership. And that my ownership would be diminishable, could be made less by money that would have to be given to actors and things like that, but that it would be what they call in the business a hard floor of 20 points. There's 20 points. You have a hard floor of 20 points. And if you're interested in that deal, we'll do the paperwork. We'll get it done. I'm the studio. Brooks Films will be the studio. We're not going to do this with a major studio. He says we're going to pitch it to major studios, but my interest is not to have the major studios own it. I want to own it. And if I get a distribution deal that's worth $1 million, that defrays some of the cost. We'll do this, And you got to remember, this is 1979, early 1979. Not early, mid 79. Okay. I was astounded. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have anything. I called somebody. I found somebody to be a lawyer for me. He had a lawyer. My lawyers started talking to his lawyer and about creating a contract for me. And he said, okay, we made a deal based on I would get paid X. I would get a deferment if the movie, basically broke even. I would get a deferment before there were any profits, and I would get profits. Now, as I told you, the original profit deal was a floor of 20%. During the course of this little time, Mel reconsidered. He told his lawyer, at least I heard this from his lawyer, and his lawyer is still a good friend of mine, and so is Mel. But his lawyer said, Mel thought, this is your first movie, and you haven't produced a movie before, even though we know you're good, we know you know how to do it, but he thinks 20% is really very, very rich deal for you. And so he would like, he's not changing your fee or your deferment, but he'd rather make it, not a rather, he said he is demanding that your back end participation will be 10%. And in a funny kind of a way, I had gone from the high of thinking I had this amazing deal to a low of thinking, geez, I'm getting completely beat up, and I haven't even, and I found the script, and I found the guys and all of that. So I spoke to my lawyer, who wasn't sure whether we should accept it, but ultimately I talked to my wife, and I said, look, what do you think? I said, look, I'm here, and I have an opportunity to make a movie. I have somebody who claims they can finance it, and I believe they have the resources, because he was as hot as it could be at that time. Mel was the biggest comedy person in the world. He was making movies, and studios were funding all of his movies. He had done Young Frankenstein. He had done all these, big movies. So she said, well, you have two choices. You can either say no and run the risk of having it fall apart, or you can say yes. But if you say yes, you must forget it. Forget the whole experience. Just accept the fact that that's the deal. Make the movie, and you never have to mention it again. It's over. It's over. But if you're going to let it eat you up, don't do it. And it was very good advice. It was really good advice, because I thought, well, I really want to make this movie, and I really, really, really have an inclination that I can do this. And I don't want to, he's a businessman and I'm not. And I don't want to fight over the details. So if the movie isn't successful, it won't matter. And if the movie is successful, I'll make some money anyway. So I said yes, and that was the end of it. That was the deal. I accepted the deal, and I went on to start making the movie. And from that point on, it was as good a situation as I could have imagined. And by the way, he made it very clear he did not want a producing credit on it, because he felt it would confuse an audience if he took a credit that said anything, because they'd think it was a comedy. A movie called The Elephant Man, he said, no, my company will be the producing company, but I don't want my name on it as a producer.
In terms of the Academy Awards, he didn't want to.
No, he was very clear about that. He said, no, I'm not going to. Well, first of all, he said, it's your movie. He wasn't, he was on location one day, the whole movie. He didn't even, he wasn't there. But he trusted me. It wasn't that he wasn't there because he didn't like it. He wasn't there because he felt that it was in hand and everything was going okay. But he was very clear about that. And the joke among myself, David Lynch, Christopher, and Eric Bergwijn was that we called Mel the owner. He was the owner. We were making it. I was a producer. David was the director. Chris and Eric were the writers with David. Mel was the owner, and he was like Paramount Pictures. He was he was the last authority. But he was not intrusive. He didn't tell us what to do or what not to do. He was very supportive. He gave us notes when he thought we needed them. I think one of the most remarkable things that he did was when David Lynch and I came back to the United States with the first cut of Elephant Man, which was about almost 2 3/4 hours. He saw the movie for the first time, and he looked at it, and he said, it's a great movie. He says, I have a lot of notes. I think it's too long. I think it has, there are a lot of things that can be cut, but I'm so proud of it that you guys, it's going to go out the way you want it to go out. If you don't want to make a cut, you don't have to. He said something like that. But he did say, he explained the commercial issues. He says, a movie at 2 hours and 45 minutes, you lose a screening a day in the theater. I mean, he knew business very well. He said, I think it could really use some judicious trimming, but it's a terrific movie, and I believe in you guys because you did it. And he said this to David and I together. By the way, when he said he would fund it, he said, we're going to take it around to every studio. We're going to ask them for money, but they're going to be surprised because we're going to not ask them to fund it. We're just going to ask them for a distribution deal with a guarantee. That's it. And then we will use that to get other deals, but they're not going to own it. So he said, so your points are going to be much more meaningful than they would if the studio took over the picture and totally funded it. And even if they gave you more points, those points will be worthless because they're going to charge it against all of their overhead and all kinds of things. And I won't. He said, when I say 10%, I mean 10% of every dollar that comes into my company from that movie, you will get 10 cents. So it sounded good. And to this day, that's what happened. I mean, he did exactly what he said. I still get checks every year, and not for huge amounts of money. But when I say not
It's
huge,
actually on Netflix. Right?
it's on Netflix. Yeah. I'll get a check for $10,000 or $15,000 or even $30,000 in a given year, coming from that 10% that I have had since 1979. The other aspect of that is the fact that I've made a lot of movies since then. It has been the most successful, transparent deal I've ever made because I've never made the amount of profits on any other movie that I made on that very first movie because I was not dealing with studio accounting practices. I was just dealing with Mel's personal accountant, and every time he gets money that comes in from foreign sales or from cassettes or whatever, I get a phone call, I see what the total check is, and I get 10% of it. And that's been the way it's been from 30 years. So I mean, I understand. Mel is a tough businessman. He doesn't make easy deals with anybody, but he stands by his deals, and I respect him for it. And so I made the right decision, is really what I'm saying as far as that goes. It was for me, it was absolutely the right decision, and I maintained a very, very positive relationship with Mel, which enabled me to make several movies with him over the course of my career. I did Francis with Mel, with Jessica Lange. I did a movie called The Doctor and the Devils with Mel. I did The Producers, the musical, and that was another situation where I went to him after I saw the play on Broadway, and I said, Mel, if you make this into a movie from the musical, I have to produce it. And he says, yeah, we'll produce it together. So we've been friends for 30-odd years, and it started from when I was his AD, but it has continued. And one of the other good things I would say about him is that, unlike many of the other people in this business who I've worked with, who tend to look at you as the first job you worked with them on, he tends to look at you in terms of the last job you worked with them. So he respects me as a producer. He doesn't think of me as the AD who became a producer, that he made a producer, which is maybe a small distinction, but it actually means a lot because when I'm out with Mel and I'm introduced to people by him, he always introduces me as the producer of The Elephant Man or the producer of this, and it is, for my own self-esteem, it's a good thing. On the other hand, I've been with other people who say, he was my production assistant on such and such a movie, because it's to their benefit to say that they knew me when I was not in a position to do anything. So I have to this day, I have a tremendously high regard for Mel. He was one of the best people I ever worked with, and he was fun to work with as a director, even when I was an AD, because his comedy is a comedy that I'm close to. I like, and he is unlike many comedians who tend to be very dark when they're not on. He is always effusive, always willing to sign autographs, meet people anywhere, anyhow, and it's just the nature of who he is.